This is Figures Sold Separately, episode 207, Spirkoy, September 17th, 2018.
They're the A-Team. You know their doses of fortune. They're the A-Team. Helping people in need. Pretend that you're Hannibal, Murdoch or Face, or maybe B.A. Baracus. You know each one is an ace. Each is sold separately with rifles and gear. If there's trouble to face, you know the A-Team's here. They're the A-Team. Hannibal, Face, Murdoch, and B.A. Baracus. Each is sold separately from Krona Toys.
So it's been like a hot minute since we've been here.
It has.
Yeah. So I mean,
Took a little vacation.
Yeah, and nothing big happened. I guess it's just the same old, right, guys?
Yeah, no, something super big happened.
What happened?
I literally have to work out the left side of my body harder than the right because of this massive rock I have on my left hand.
Congratulations!
I have to work out one side more than the other, but that's for different reasons.
That comes later in the marriage. Congratulations, guys!
Thank you.
Thanks.
We took a break because of Dragon Con and a couple of things. I did not go this year, but you guys both did.
We did.
So did James Johnson, who,
Yes.
if you are an avid listener of the show, you'll know him from his dramatic fan fiction readings, which
is
we'll
coming back.
talk about later.
Yeah.
But that's probably going to come back. So, but congratulations, you guys! If you've ever been to Dragon Con, you know in the Marriott there is a bar that is elevated above the rest of the gigantic lobby that most of Dragon Con happens in.
Pulse Loft.
The Pulse Lounge, Pulse Loft. And and it was so funny that word of your engagement spread like wildfire to everyone, even though if they weren't there.
Yeah, it happened so fast.
Right. And I found out I wasn't going to tell you how I found out until the show, but you kind of kept asking. But you were convinced that James Johnson had blabbered something on Facebook or something.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was Casey.
It wasn't Casey Keene, who's been on the show before, who now lives in Las Vegas, and I see occasionally when I'm in Las Vegas.
She's been on the show before.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, yeah. And Michael, who
Michael.
has a movie out, by the way, on Amazon right now.
I helped fund that.
Nice.
$20 of that movie is thank you.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, cool.
But and I may see them. I'm going to Las Vegas this coming week, so I leave on.
Which we should plug that.
Tuesday.
Actually, I want to view it real soon.
Yeah, because you can.
Oh my gosh, yeah, check it out.
It's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
it's called. Now I'm completely blanking on the name of the movie. It's Forces in there somewhere. I can't remember the name of the damn movie. But you can.
But it's kind of a pastiche anyway. Like it's, as I understand it. But
it is. It's kind of it's a serious but satirical
we've kind of
homage film.
Right.
It's not meant to be like funny necessarily, although it is in a different level kind of funny. But yeah, it's meant as an homage to a director who's from Las Vegas who made these types of B movies. So so it's cheesy, but it's meant to be cheesy kind of thing.
Exactly.
Isn't it called The Head?
No. I can't remember. I don't want to stop and then look for it, so I can't do that. But anyway, congratulations to you guys.
Fatal Future.
Fatal Future.
Oh, that's what
you can watch it on Amazon
Fatal
Prime.
Future.
Yeah, check
and he's
it out.
in it, and it's we've fallen a little bit out of touch with him, or Carly and I have. I know you guys talk a little bit more, but
I just happen to go to Las Vegas like 2 or 3 times a year. So I see him.
Super talented guy, and the story. If I can break that story down for just a second, because James told it to us. He they showed it on Dragon Con TV.
Right.
Yeah.
And there were enough people that kind of tuned into it on Dragon Con TV, and it's sort of off the wall, and like it's almost like a custom, like a tailor-made fan fiction.
Yeah. And you can come into it in the middle of it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's not what I meant to say. Like a cult fiction is what I meant. It's like a cult type movie. It's very Evil Dead kind of tone, where it's sort of serious, but there's an undertone of like satire, which is very Michael. But that
is into his entire personality.
Seriously.
Yeah. So there's,
So good at that.
but it was popular enough that they had an impromptu panel at Dragon Con, and people were cosplaying his characters
Jesus.
like 24 hours after the after it
Dragon
aired.
Con people are crazy how quickly they can come up with stuff.
And then they showed
really
it again, and they showed it again. So there was, I mean, that's pretty rad.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
baller.
look up Fatal Future on Amazon Prime. You can watch it on your big TV and enjoy it. It's funny. Go into it not taking it seriously, and you will immensely enjoy it.
Yeah, you'll have
It's
so
so
much
weird
fun.
how we like transitioned from the story of us getting engaged to this.
Yeah, when are we going to get back to that? Because we didn't actually get to
whatever.
tell it.
to your giant rock,
Well,
which I'm
basically
sure
it was
we'll post
because
photos
the
of.
Keens
Yeah.
were up several stories up and saw/heard the commotion
Yeah.
and didn't realize it was us at first. So
Yeah.
So first of all, did you have any idea it was coming?
I did. I knew it was coming at some point during the weekend.
Because of your spider senses were tingling, or because
we planned it.
Oh, okay.
because there were like 4 attempts before this, and something really crazy happened to
Every single
time. Yeah, like
Yeah.
everything from
Let's not go into
yeah.
It was bad, but we got through it. So
Most recent time, I actually ran myself over with my car. So
yeah,
like
shit on that level, like 4 separate
like things
times.
happened on the day, like 4 separate times.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you were going to propose that day.
The next day.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
the next day. Yeah.
Yeah, and this happened over
You know what?
and over.
Because if people don't know, you guys met each other at Dragon Con, so it's very fitting that
Yes.
you got engaged.
Not only
Right.
did we meet at Dragon Con, this was on the 5th anniversary of our very first date. So we met on Thursday night, and then on Sunday we finally got to hang out again, and we had a date all through the night. Like we met for the puppet show.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, we did. We met at the puppet show, or we met right before the puppet show.
Yeah.
You met
And
up.
then
not
we met up.
met. Okay.
No, we met up, and then
the puppet slam,
the puppet
the midnight
slam.
puppet slam.
And
Wasn't
then
the
we
only
just
thing good.
Yeah,
and then we just turned it into this like amazing epic date.
and I've been turned on by puppets ever since.
That's so awkward.
And we and then we got well wishes from like a bunch of from like Karen Gillan and
yeah.
and
Really?
Peter
Yeah, because
Capaldi.
any celebrity we met, we were like, "Hey, we just got engaged," and it was awesome.
All the Sesame Street guys gave us, life,
Karen Gillan
life
was like,
advice.
"Oh my gosh," it was so cute.
Yeah, it was great.
That's awesome.
It was super. So we had a really great time, and it was not intended to be like this big public thing because we really thought like we'd go up to this loft and people would. We had the friends that we had kind of wanted to meet there, and we kind of thought it would be like this little thing, and maybe a few strangers around us would clap or whatever. But like
whatever at Dragon Con.
well, what we didn't realize was that when I got down on one knee, like the pulse bar or the loft kind of noticed. And what happens at Dragon Con is when one group of about 15, 20 people
Suddenly goes
cheers,
silent. Oh, okay.
everybody else looks to see
What's happening?
Really, they look to see what celebrity just walked out onto the floor.
Right.
So they're trying to figure out what's going on.
I figured that maybe the pulse, like everybody got quiet when you were doing your thing.
No.
And everybody noticed that like a corner
they
got
just-
quiet.
Like everybody
15
cheered.
people started cheering.
Like
and it
all
caught
our
the
friends
attention.
knew when I was like pulled Carly aside and I was talking to her, but then when I got down,
Gave
on
her a
one
talking
knee,
to?
like
Yeah,
they clapped,
you know.
and then everybody else at the loft looked and cheered and saw me getting down on one knee, and then what we didn't realize is the time, like between the time I got down on one knee and the time that like I stood back up and hugged Carly, like everybody on the floor below had just ground to a halt and were like trying to figure out what was going on, and then they had all figured it out in that like 10-15 second spot because they saw
Yeah.
me down on one
Okay.
knee. And so when we stood up and hugged, like the entire convention, like
It was
and if
kind
you've
of
never been to
amazing.
Dragon Con, at any given time in the Marriott lobby, there are 10,000 people at least.
somewhere, I think it's somewhere between
Yeah.
6,000 and 10,000 people
Yeah.
were there.
yeah. So
And
we,
that's only like a sixth of the entire convention.
Yeah, which
Right.
is insane.
and we
But
really like we couldn't have like I had settled, just so you know, like I had a few plans of good ways to propose at Dragon
Well,
Con.
and he kept building the tension really well because,
Yeah.
like, I didn't know which day he was going to do it. And so I kept,
Yeah.
like, trying to, like, look for clues. Like, does he have this, is there a big bulge in his pocket or is he just happy to see me?
Oh, whatever.
And,
I was carrying. Okay, first of all, why did they stop making small ring boxes? Like ring boxes now are the size of a damn baseball.
Because it's the world of Instagram. But anyway, so he kept building the tension because he would be like, well,
Wait, stop.
She knew I was carrying the ring.
It's the
whole
world
time.
of Instagram. You're going to have to go back and explain that.
oh, it's the world of Instagram. Everything is picture based now. So,
Yeah.
So
a
they
box,
make the boxes bigger?
yeah, because it's going to be more of like a thing that you
But,
post on Instagram.
but wouldn't that make the ring look smaller if the box was bigger?
She's making this up as she goes, Matt. She has no...
Okay, sorry, I called you out and too much.
No, I really thought that. I don't know.
But things kept coming up, like with the various ideas I had, and when we had friends that were leaving the convention early, so I was like, well, I don't want to like wait until after they leave to propose. So like,
but he kept building the tension by being like, well, I was going to do it at this point, but it didn't work for XYZ. So like, which
this
was
Pulse
like really
thing
fun.
was actually what I settled for. Like, it was something where I was like, well, this isn't exactly how I wanted to have, like, we gotta, like,
but it went way better than you thought it
went
was.
So
it
much.
went
It was like
better.
so freaking magical.
It turned out to be better than any of the things I had planned because of something that we couldn't have planned, which was that everybody would turn to pay attention to what the noise was, and then the whole convention would erupt. And so for the rest of the time we were there, especially that day, but really up until the end of the convention, we had people coming up to us like, here's a picture I took from like the elevator and from the top floor, and like, oh, were you guys the ones that got engaged?
Yeah,
oh,
like I seriously felt like a little mini celebrity. Like, it was so amazing.
Yeah, it was super cool.
I think that, well, first of all, we'll post some photos on our Facebook page. But I think that I'm sorry that you broke your ankle and leg, but I think that if the side effect of that is that you guys got engaged at DragonCon, I think that's way better.
It was super cool.
It was like the coolest.
It was really a great, like, I was trying to find like this perfect moment and then settled for not a perfect moment, and then it turned out to be way more perfect than we ever thought it would be. So.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Sometimes if you want perfect, you have to let go of perfect, and perfect just shows up. So that's kind of how we do.
That's a deep thought from Ken Handy over here.
Thanks.
You should make that like a motivational poster. That was that was deep, man.
Stuart Smalley.
You're good enough. You're smart enough, and
dog on it.
And you're a disgraced senator from Minnesota.
Oh,
hashtag me too.
Welcome to Figure Sold Separately. I'm Ken at Multiverse AVL on Twitter, and sitting across from me making stupid dad jokes is...
Oh, no, wait a minute. Give me a little credit on that. That was pretty good. I'm Matt. You can catch me on Twitter at NCMattJ and on Instagram at NCMattJ828.
Right on.
I'm Carly. You can find me...
Car2.
Yeah. You can find me on the Instagrams at car2.d2.
And we are Figures Sold Separately on all the social media. So you can find us Facebook.
No, we're not. We're FSS Podcast on most of them.
We're FSS Podcast. You can find us on... Except
for Facebook, we're Figures Sold Separately Podcast and Web Show. We should probably change that.
you can just Google us. But anyway, we're FSS Podcast on Facebook. Because we are on... That is our Facebook.
That's true. Yeah, if you do a search.
So FSS Podcast. You'll find all our stuff, our Twitter and our Facebook and our website, which is fsspodcast.com, and it is back up. It is back on. So
yes, and thanks to Ken and to James for all the work that they put into getting that back up and running.
It's our new brand spanking new website, and there are still some details that are still broken. So just be patient with the parts that are still under construction. Over the next couple of weeks, those should get ironed out. But in the meantime, enjoy it and check it out, and let us know if you have any suggestions about cool stuff we could put there. And if you would like to join the show or be on the show, reach out, get in touch with us, let us know what you want to talk about, and
reach out and touch someone.
It might be a thing we do. Seems like I don't know. I forgot something there.
Forgot the whole show. That's it. That's great, everybody. That's all we got.
Yep,
that's it. That's all we got. So
we were just going to talk about that. You guys said you guys were going to Cuba. So we just accidentally found out that everybody's going to Cuba next year.
But at different times.
At different times, not together.
When are you going?
I'm going in May.
Okay, and we're going in July. So you're going to go first and let us know what's not to be missed.
Yeah, it's going to be, not everybody can say they've been to Cuba. It'll be my first communist country.
Oh, congrats,
we're both going on cruises.
Breaking your communist cherry.
Yeah, popping that communist cherry. That com chair. I don't know.
Wow.
But yeah, and we were off for a little while, but we're back, and we've all been looking forward to getting to talk, and we've got some cool new ideas that Ken came up with that are going to be new segments from people that you know and remember.
Yeah, it'll be cool.
People you know and love.
We're moving into a little bit of a new era of Figures Sold Separately, where we'll be attracting some bigger guests, and we've got our website back up. That's going to be part of that, and a little bit, changing up the content a little as we've done from time to time. So
see the cooler
good things.
The cooler months in Asheville is when you get your shit done. Like that's when it gets cold and it gets rainy
we
and
take
snowy.
more breaks over the summer.
Yeah.
And then in the winter it's easier, which is weird because you'd think it'd be the other way around. But
yeah, you definitely in the winter in this town, in this area, you definitely get into routines more than you do in the summer. So.
Yeah, and creative time, which makes spring really cool because that's when everybody comes out with like their new album and their new movie that they shot over the winter. And
exactly,
we're excited to do kind of some of that same stuff. So stay tuned, and we're looking forward to growing our audience and doing some cool new things for those of you that are with us every step of the way.
And we survived Hurricane Florence. So.
Yeah, we did.
Well, we're supposed to get some more weather over the next 2 days, but we'll.
Oh, for real? Still?
Yeah, but it'll be fine.
It's just rain for us. I mean,
it really
I feel
is.
Everybody
really
batten
bad
down the hatches, but
I feel really bad for those in coastal North and South Carolina.
People got hit so hard.
Yeah, I heard Chesterfield County, which is down in like east central northern part of South Carolina, was under emergency. They've had a lot of bad flooding. And New Bern, which is the home of Pepsi Cola, for people that don't know.
Yes.
New Bern was under like 10 feet of water. So I tweeted at Pepsi. I'm like, hey, I hope you guys are going to like step up, because this is like, if Atlanta had something happen to it, Coca-Cola would be there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They would.
Yeah. So what have you guys, other than Dragon Con, you guys, what have you guys been doing?
Well, we've been running, multiple businesses, and we're very entrepreneurial. And
you guys do have a lot of pokers in the fire.
We do have a lot of pokers in the fire. Ew. Oh, I know everybody is super wondering how all my plants are doing. They are thriving and doing really well. I just wanted you guys to update you guys on that.
When are you going to bring them inside? Because it's going to get cold in the next month or so.
I know. I'm kind of playing it by ear. I don't really know.
We kind of had a little bit of a test run for that with
we did because of the storm.
So bringing things in for that.
So now I've got a few more plants living in the windowsill. They're
Some things
super
just
happy
die,
there.
and then they come back. So
interesting.
Like that's like certain plants are allowed to die, and because when the weather warms up, they just sprout right back up.
Right.
Yeah, which is pretty
perennials.
Crazy.
Those are perennials, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think so. Yeah. I have somehow kept a plant that I got for my birthday alive this whole time.
That's actually pretty awesome.
It almost died, but now it's thriving. So.
Well, good.
Because I followed the fucking directions that were on the thing now, which I did not do before.
So many things almost die right before they thrive, like podcasts and relationships.
Wow.
And
man, you're like coming out with like this deep shit, man.
And business ventures. And sometimes it's darkest before the dawn. Sometimes to everything there is a season. Turn.
Now. It's true. So we've been.
We're figures sold separately. I'm Ken.
We've already done that.
Oh, we've been going back through TOS, Star Trek,
the original series.
Yes.
The one that I couldn't get Cartu to watch.
Oh my gosh, I get it now. I get why.
Really? Because I don't get it.
Toward the end of the first season, the writing really picks up.
Oh my gosh, it's like some profound shit.
And then the action really
tell
picks
me
up.
that. I got really excited.
The second season, it craters in the third season. Second season's strong, and then it only went for 3, so it's not like TNG where you've got to get through like.
And you're seeing the remastered version, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that helps.
I imagine.
Well,
so.
a little. I mean, it helps. They didn't like replace actors or anything, but
right. But the graphic, like the special effects have been
are a little more consistent.
They have, yeah.
Which it's interesting to watch.
They're not they don't stick out like before they would stick out.
It's interesting to see them bridge the gap between the gap between updating the graphics, but not bringing them like so far up to date that they're like glaringly.
Yes.
It's not like the or what do they call the reboot, the soft reboot or whatever, the Kelvinverse. It's not like they're replacing it with those graphics, and then suddenly you cut to an interior and everything's all pastel and
they keep the spirit of the
they do CGI that still looks like it could be model work, but it
fits.
Yeah.
It looks realistic, but it also fits.
Not to just be like we remaster this and make everything look modern. Like they don't. They make it look still very vintage, but it's not quite. You don't see like the fishing line holding up the Enterprise anymore,
or it flying by crooked. Like it does it all the time.
Can something really be crooked in space, though? I mean,
I guess not, but it does look weird.
It does. My favorite thing that still dates the show has It's not the special effects.
Ooh, can I guess?
Yeah, you can guess.
The hairstyles.
No, it's not the hairstyles.
Yeoman Rand's beehive doesn't...
Although that is epic. Okay. No. My favorite is the...
Thirsty-ass Yeoman Rand. Man.
She is. God, someone just lay that woman.
Yeah, she was thirsty.
Yeah. I'd volunteer.
She gave...
I volunteer's tribute.
She's dead now, but...
Only recently, though. She only died like a couple years ago, didn't she?
How recently does somebody have to die where you're still good to go, Matt?
No, that's
like
not
you were
what
like,
I mean.
volunteer, and I'm like, she's dead. And you're like, yeah, but she hasn't been dead for long. And I'm like, well,
Jesus Christ,
she's not.
She had a long and
way to make it weird, Ken.
She had a long and fruitful life.
No, my favorite thing that dates the show is the alternate portraiture lighting that they put on when they do a close-up of somebody's face, because it's so different than the rest of the scene, and I love it.
And that is definitely a trope of like the time.
Such a trope
of the time where like the and they'll even do the Vaseline over the lens thing for the women.
They
stuff.
do. It's phenomenal.
TOS had some. I mean, there are some things that are hallmarks of the show that are going to be elements of their time that really can't and shouldn't be updated, like the way the soundtrack works, like the score does undercut like dialogue and stuff like that, which is a very
the mixing of
60s
the whole thing,
and 70s. Like they don't do that anymore, where somebody makes a punchline and like the orchestra goes like wah wah wah, like that kind of thing is like they don't do that with shows now. And it's it's really tough to watch like Discovery and this and realize that they're designed to take place in the same continuity, because they're not even the same kind of show. But,
but I think that, and I don't, this is where I think that Trek and Star Wars are very different. Star Trek, I think for the most part, as big Trek fans, we have learned to kind of take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to like the look and feel of things. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, Discovery seems way more modern than like the original series does, but it's like, well, okay, but we understand the original series was done in the 60s and we're moving on from that. Right. Okay, let's not be stupid about it. For the most part, there are still,
there's a reason that like the color palette is so distinctive as well. Like they were selling color televisions.
Yeah.
So there were
not a lot of color.
That and the 1960s
programs.
Batman show were deliberately like really bright and garish for the purposes of it made color TVs look really nice in the store, and it made it so that if they were broadcast in black and white, people could still watch them, because if you know anything about the way black and white TV shows were recorded, colors had to be very distinct so that when they were grayscaled, they would still read as that's a green tree, and it wouldn't just be like gray on gray on gray. You could your imagination would interpolate colors through different shades of gray. And so these had to work for that.
Maybe even 50 of them.
50 Shades of... So anyway, but
I'd watch that track.
But then they would look really bright in colors, and they were playing a lot with that. Yeah. Now colors, like a show will have a palette, whereas the palette in the 60s for color TV shows was
like primary
every
colors.
Palette. Yeah. Every palette. Use every color at once.
So many gels used on...
Oh, God,
gels.
all the gels.
It's like when you can tell somebody that, and I'd say this self-deprecatingly, but you can tell somebody that just learned how to use Photoshop. Because every project, they use every feature of Photoshop.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, that's a really over-engineered image. And it's the same kind of thing where they had a lot of new toys, and they wanted to use all the new toys. Mm-hmm. So that's... but one of the things that surprised us was that when you get a certain distance into the show and the characters start to gel, for one thing, figuring out that Kirk, Spock, McCoy relationship is really, like, that's the heart of the show, and the first half of the first season doesn't have that.
You don't get it, but oh man, when it works.
But it works, and there being really sharp dialogue. Like, there is very well written dialogue in... like, it's not all cheese. Like, there is some very well written stuff that we
Matt's
were
over
like,
here shaking his head.
Okay, wait. I will give you that these stories are really good. They're imaginative stories. Mm-hmm. Some of the dialogue and the way that dialogue is acted it's very much a product of its time.
Some of it is solid even for right now. And that's what surprised me, because I'd seen episodes here and there, but I had never seen TOS like in order.
Yeah,
it's solid in let me put it this way. It's solid in there's been a couple of episodes that we've watched recently where you could tell that some of the actors that they had brought on specifically for bit parts, you could tell they were really, really talented stage actors. So they brought this, like they brought this incredible craft, and it still had a certain flavor to it, but suddenly you could tell that in the midst of this thing that we've grown out of with like the technology and the color scheme and all of this, that there were still people that were operating in the highest peak of their potential and their experience and all of that. When you have these elements that do go out of style or maybe don't age well, when you've got a Shakespearean type actor that has a walk-on part in an episode and they put their whole fucking heart and soul into it, it brings a different flavor to the rest of what they're in the scene with.
Well, and I tend to think of TNG as being kind of one of the first Star Trek series where, like, as they cut to credits, you're kind of sitting there for a minute going like, like that episode had something to say, like that. Wow, they really left us. But like there are some TOS episodes where like at the end, there's that moment with like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, or there's that moment with like Kirk sort of musing about, I think one of the ones we watched most recently was toward the end of the first season, the Balance of Terror, which has Mark Leonard, who would play Sarek later, but he's playing the Romulan commander, and it's sort of the game of chess through the, with the cloaked vessels and that kind of thing. And the episode really is about like at what point is it justifiable to start a war, and at what point is there like an understand, and they get through it without starting a war. And some of the dialogue, some of the acting, we have to remember that as TOS went on and went into sort of the movie era where they took that cast and went into the movies, things became a little more self-referential. They became a little, if anything, they kind of became cheesier retroactively. But at this point in the series, they're playing everything really straight, which is ludicrous when you look at like the production values and things like that. But at the same time, good actors and good writers can sell it, and that was what was so interesting. Like it was never Batman camp where it was never intended to be, like the actors never really played it super straight. But let's remember some of the people that were writing Star Trek episodes, like Ray Bradbury and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on
yeah, and I got nothing. I don't know any other names.
Now, did you guys watch The Man Trap first, which is the original pilot?
No, not The Man Trap. You're talking about The Cage.
The Cage, that's right, The Cage.
Yeah, and then The Menagerie part 1 and 2 is where they go back.
And then The Menagerie is the two-part episode, which involves the entire cast of the Enterprise sitting down and watching The Cage.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, here's this, because it hadn't been aired.
Right.
So, of course,
they recut it.
Brilliant.
But they didn't use like clips from it. They showed the entire episode. That's why it's a two-parter, because they had to frame it with basically
it was actually
a story device that had everybody sitting around watching.
But it was very clever.
But did you guys watch The Cage separately?
No, we watched it before we started TOS.
Right. Well, and then
that's what I mean. You watched it as the standalone pilot episode.
No, we watched it as though it were the aired pilot.
Right,
that's what I meant.
Yeah, so we watched it.
You didn't watch it within the context of the show.
Right, we watched The Cage first.
All by itself.
Right.
Okay.
Which, interestingly, doesn't play as well on its own as it does as part of the Menagerie.
Okay. I'm going to disagree with you there, because I watched The Cage, and I was like, holy shit, this is what we could have had. And, like, I don't like that aesthetic of TOS, where everything is cartoonish and gaudy to color, and like, and it's very 60s. Like, I feel like The Cage holds up better, and just everything about it seems more modern, and like it was so far ahead of its time. And I feel like NBC got a hold of it and was like, this is not what we think science fiction should be. So what we need you to do is have crystals and big switches and blah blah blah. Where I felt like I felt that Gene Roddenberry was thinking ahead of like, this is this vision that I want, and it was more like TNG. Like he already had that in his head, and like everything is more muted. There's a female first officer, and he's literally seeing the way things are going, and then extrapolating that out into the future, and then showing it in The Cage. And I thought that everything about it, the acting was better. I thought the writing was better. I thought that the bridge looked better. Everything just looked better about it. And I saw The Cage, and I was like, damn, like this is what we could have had. This is awesome.
Well, but to me, The Cage wasn't really thematically as sound as, for example, when they recut it. Well, I say Gene Roddenberry wrote that episode. So when Gene Roddenberry recut his own work, and getting back to, it was blanking, but of course, Gene wrote a lot of episodes. DC Fontana being one of the preeminent female writers, head writers on shows of the time, which was still very unusual. Harlan Ellison, Jerome Bixby, a lot of whom went on to write TNG. A lot of people don't know that the first 2 seasons of TNG are full of the same writers that wrote TOS.
Well, they were
who
also
were still working at the time, and a lot of them were scripts that were intended for TOS.
They were. It was a failed reboot or a failed return of Star Trek after the movie. It was
which became the motion picture.
Right. It was like Star Trek
Phase 2.
Phase 2. Yeah. So it was another dumb.
The idea was to
name.
bring back the original cast and do a whole nother series around that cast, and it became Star Trek. Then it kind of branched off.
It became the movie,
and it became right. They decided, because of Star Wars being such a big success, they said, "Well, why don't we take this cast and do a series of movies, and then take all these scripts and do a reboot of the show with an entire new cast?" So,
which, by the way, have you ever seen the original Star Trek movie?
You're
building up to that.
Yeah, we're building up to that. I've seen The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Okay. The Star Trek, the original movie, the Star Trek the Motion Picture, Star Trek 1,
is very divisive.
It's a very good movie. It's just edited terribly. It's just.
It's also before they figured out what Star Trek as movies were going to be, which was really determined and we've talked about this on the show before. It was kind of determined by Wrath of Khan, which then sort of started off a movie continuity, because the original.
The original movie and Wrath of Khan don't have a lot in common. It's not
right, but that's also because Wrath of Khan then started off this arc that lasted through Star Trek 3 and 4 and
straight through 4.
You never finished what you were saying, which related to something that you were saying, which was something that I wanted to add to, which was
the thematic elements.
Thematic elements.
Something really poignant to me in the Menagerie, and I'm about to. Flash forward if you're going to watch this and you don't want me to spoil like a 70-year-old television episode, but there's
wait a minute, it can't be 70 years old.
Well, 50, 51, 52. Okay, 52-year-old television episode.
I was like, God damn, it's not that old. No way.
Okay, 50. Yeah, if you don't want me to spoil a 52-year-old television episode, but when you find out that the 2 episodes had been about Spock basically risking his life because it was the only thing that he could still be put to death for under their law.
Yeah.
Spock had been risking his entire life and volunteering for court-martial and throwing himself on the mercy of the court in order to get his former commanding officer back to a place where his disability wouldn't matter. Mm-hmm. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like that was a moment where they rolled the credits and you're sitting there going
wow.
Because that's another weird thing is they didn't really do stingers at the end of episodes in those days. They would do the reveal at the end and then it'd be credits. Yeah. And you're like, wow, there wasn't a moment where they all kind of sit around going well, we all learned something here today. And, the lights are flickering a little. We'll see if we need to put an edit in here. But
no, we're good.
Okay.
But yeah,
but so there's that moment where you just they just drop you to credits and you're like even TNG, there was they'd have a moment on the bridge where they're all kind of well, that was a rollicking adventure. See everybody next week. It's that kind of thing. And
I don't ever remember them saying "see everybody next week."
Bye, everybody.
Or they'd wrap up a B story or something like that in the last few minutes, and everybody would laugh, and it'd be that kind of thing. No, fuck that, man. At least season 1 of TOS, they're just and I think they do that more lately because I think when most people think of TOS, they think of
a 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I think even later in TOS, there's where they're standing around the captain's chair and it's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and they're just kind of wow, that was
Spirkoy.
Spirkoy.
Like if Spock and Kirk were a couple, they'd be skirt.
Well, they have talked. I mean, there are there are papers written on
fanfic.
There are papers written on Kirk, Spock, and McCoy being the id, ego, super ego kind of elements of the psyche
cool.
or whatever. But anyway.
But what you were talking about tone, because the thematically the first the Cage is very much you have this hero who looks like a classic hero and he's very manly, and his whole thing is I don't want this power, which is very different thematically than the way that most of the rest of season 1 works. Which, to go back to what you were saying about how Gene Roddenberry had this very specific vision for what it should look like, I feel like the best examples of sci-fi are always things that have been they've been grounded enough in reality that people can relate to them, but they've been able to kind of shift and bring something new in with the scene and the storyline in such a way that then when they bring in a new element emotionally or a new idea socially, that it's able to get more traction. Like we've talked about on this show that Battlestar Galactica was really good at that. Like I feel like specifically sci-fi is really good about making us question the things that just feel really natural to us. So it makes sense that for Gene Roddenberry, his first thing would have been kind of questioning, like, what would it look like for this macho man to be questioning his role in that and saying, I don't want this. I don't want this power. I don't want this responsibility. That wasn't a very that wouldn't have been a very naturally resonated with idea on the surface, but I think that perhaps the depth that he was really wanting to explore, it took a little bit for him to be able to put those ideas in it. And I think we kind of see that very symbolically with taking that first episode and cutting it up and putting it in the later episodes of season 1. But we also see that as kind of him being able to put the more really powerful thematic elements that would have been more socially unusual, really starting to bring those into the episodes.
Yeah. I mean, I also blame the network. And the reason I bring that up is...
Well, and the network, especially in season 1, didn't want Star Trek to really be about anything.
No.
And Gene Roddenberry was always about, like, this show is a metaphor. Like, the fact that they're in space is really just to sort of mask, like, the really deep stories I'm trying to tell.
And if you go back and watch the pilots of all of your favorite shows from the 70s and 80s. Specifically, I will say the pilot for Macgyver, the pilot for Airwolf, the pilot for the A-Team especially, and the pilot for Knight Rider. And there's a couple of others, but those are the ones I'm really that are coming to mind. They are complete 180s from what the show became. And it's nowadays, usually the pilot is the weaker kind of introduction, but it's kind of a little bit weaker than what the show becomes. But back then it's like the pilot so a lot of times the pilot you'd get backdoor pilots, which you don't get as often anymore. And a backdoor pilot is kind of like the pilot for Battlestar Galactica 2004, which is that it's like a movie of the week, and it kind of is actually. So Airwolf, I think, was like that, and I think that Knight Rider was like that as well. And so they have much larger budgets.
Yeah.
But the writing is better, the acting was better, and all those. And like when you watch, God, especially the A-Team, if you watch the actual pilot of the A-Team, you're like, holy shit, this looks like it's going to be a damn good show.
Yeah.
And then you watch like the second, third, fourth episode, and you're like, oh, God. And I feel like that's because the network gets a hold of it, the bean counters get a hold of it, you need to cut your budget, you need to, get a cheaper writer, or hey, we need you to, back then, TV was much more about, we want to be able to catch someone even if they come in 10 or 15 minutes into the episode. We want them to like stop when they're channel surfing and watch, because there was no concept of, hey, I'm 3 episodes into the season.
Yeah.
I'm lost now. You always had to kind of like reintroduce the characters every time.
Well, that's why they used to have opening sequences. And in the 70s and 80s, I remember like almost every opening sequence would have for one thing, they were like a minute long. Which is why when we talk about like iconic theme songs, they all come from the 70s and 80s, because shows now don't have theme songs, because you can just go back but part of the reason they had themes was the opening sequence had to be large enough to, first of all, satisfy everybody's SAG contract and like make sure that everybody got a credit before the show started, which they just do over the show now. But also recap the premise of the show for everybody that was just catching up. I mean, Star Trek even did that with the Space: The Final Frontier,
also just giving the captain's log at the very beginning. That's totally a thing to kind of
think how many 60s, 70s, and 80s shows are like, Space: The Final Frontier. These are the voyages of that's an iconic intro now, but like that was because if it was half of season in, like it caught you up to what you basically like the broad strokes of what you needed to know. Same thing with like, the A-Team. There's a reason the first 30 seconds of the A-Team theme are nothing but dum da da dum da da dum dum dum.
Yeah, because
you had to have the guy over the top going like, in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Now, having escaped from
the Los Angeles Underground.
Yeah, if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team.
Boom! That's all I need to know what's going on in this fucking show. And Macgyver did that shit too. Macgyver would go, well, so blah 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 blah, and he would like narrate at the beginning of the thing, and they would subtly slip in like, I'm working for the Phoenix Foundation. It's a non-governmental agency. Blah 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 blah, and you're like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
Yeah,
which is a lot easier than trying to redo exposition in dialogue, awkwardly reinsert exposition. Like it is a little heavy-handed to do that, but
it's easier than working it into the script.
But I've been going back and I've been watching random episodes of Macgyver because it used to be one of my favorite shows when I was a kid. First of all, does not hold up. But second of all, it is so crazy that after where I'm watching it obviously on Amazon Prime, so there are no commercials, but like you can tell where the commercials were.
Yeah.
And like every time they come back from the commercial, I can tell that like they subtly recap what I've missed, but in a very sly way, to where if I came in after that commercial and I stopped, this totally Macgyver's on, I'm 10 minutes in.
Right.
You're not totally.
Yeah.
But there are iconic opening sequences that have done that all the way up to present day, but a lot of them are holdovers from sort of the last vestiges of that. And one of the best examples I can think of is The Simpsons. The intro to The Simpsons, more than any show that runs now, because the intro to The Simpsons is still sort of a rehash of the way that they did it. I mean, it's been redone a few times, but it has Family Guy doesn't introduce you to the characters. It basically has nothing to do with the show. Meanwhile, The Simpsons, as it runs through, first thing it tells you is this takes place in a town full of characters. Zooms in on Bart. Bart's riding, in detention.
Here are the ones you need to watch for.
Yeah, here's a kid. Here's a kid. He gets in trouble at school. They run out. Marge is at the grocery store. Okay, this is the mom. And really, what's kind of crazy about this is that it establishes the characters. Even now, it establishes them almost more as they were at the beginning of the series. Where then it shows you like, okay, here's Homer, and he works at a power plant, and he's really klutzy, and he's the guy that's constantly taking pratfalls, which is not so much like he's more of like a different kind of character now. But
that's true.
But if you watched first season,
here's
Simpsons,
Lisa.
I'm sure that's very
here's Lisa. She
on.
plays saxophone.
Well, no, like first season Simpsons, Homer is like a jackass with a horrible like temper and anger management problems.
Oh my gosh,
he's not like he's constantly grabbing Bart and like strangling him till he's almost dead. Like,
he still does that.
He does that too, but it's much more comedic. Like he is much more of he is not the bumble, and he's smarter. He's not a bumbling idiot like he is.
Well, that show's been very different.
Yeah,
we could probably do a whole episode. about how Simpsons has changed.
Also, The Simpsons was kind of, when it started, was kind of the cartoon version of Married with Children.
Yeah,
very much.
That's good. Yeah,
yeah, I could. I
could totally see that.
Yeah,
sort of in the same way that the Flintstones was sort of a send up of like
the Honeymooners.
The Honeymooners. Yeah. So,
which only lasted for like a season.
What, the Honeymooners?
Yeah, it was only on for like one season. I was like,
which is crazy.
No way! It feels, it's so iconic. I thought it was on for like 6 seasons.
Getting back to Star Trek, we kind of kicked it off because after that was The Conscience of the King, which is the episode where, and I'm going to spoil a bunch of things, but like Conscience of the King, which is really about,
if you haven't watched these yet, look at your life, look at your choices.
Where the conscience says the girl who a week ago was tired
I'm so glad you took that bait.
The Conscience of the King, which is really about like can somebody commit genocide on it's where the Shakespearean actor who turns out to basically be Space Hitler. And before Khan came along, but like he's basically turned out to be like the guy that had killed half a colony in order to like save the other half, and was known as like a guy who massacred a whole bunch of people. And like the question comes down in this episode, ostensibly aimed at children, of like under what circumstances is somebody just justified in killing like 4,000 people.
And this is only 20 years after World War II.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you end up like everybody kind of gets their just desserts in the end, and then you've got kind of that moment of like Kirk ruminating over like, was he actually a good person? And it's like, holy crap.
Charlie X is one of my favorite Trek episodes of all time. I mean, and that deals with how do you deal with someone who has like almost
unstoppable
power and is just a bratty kid, when it comes down to it. And,
of course, the Twilight Zone had that episode too. So,
look, I'm going to tell you right now,
which is still the freakiest Twilight Zone episode.
I'm going to tell you right now,
you've seen like
some of the
episodes.
It still takes the
some of the best television I've ever seen is like that first season of the Twilight Zone. Mm-hmm. Like there's some fucking amazing storytelling in those episodes, and I think that we are definitely. I think we are. How would you say it? We are. I don't know what that sound was. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me.
I don't think it was me either.
It was Ken.
I thought it was Ken too, because I was talking, so it couldn't have been me.
I don't know.
Okay, well,
maybe it was me.
Because we were all looking at each other like, who was that? Kenny's a sandwich or something. But like, I think that we are definitely spoiled today because television today is nothing like it used to be.
Yeah.
So television today is cinematic. It is movie quality, and that's what we've come to expect. Whereas back then, and the other big thing that television has now is streaming, because you can go back like you couldn't
that's why
have
MASH
serialized.
was so weird. Like, not to bring in yet another show, but like MASH was so weird because it was one of those shows that you could kind of appreciate individual episodes, but in general, like MASH was a very had a lot of arcs.
Yeah,
over the course of it. Almost soap operas did at the time.
But it wasn't required that you had to know what was going on from week to week. Like you could keep coming back to it and you wouldn't be completely lost. Whereas, I mean, if you missed half of the first season of Breaking Bad, then you're fucked. Like you need to,
or House of Cards.
You need to go figure out your life and then go back and like start it from the beginning, which you can do now. Like if I was watching the Sci-Fi show or Sci-Fi Channel and I saw. Well, I think they just canceled it, but I think Netflix picked it up or somebody picked it up, but I think it was maybe Amazon. But like what's the futuristic where they're out in the solar system show that was on
Lost in
Sci-Fi?
Space?
No, it was although that's an excellent show.
It's so good.
Whatever.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I can't remember. I'm my brain's
on
fried
Sci-Fi?
right now. Yeah, it was on the Sci-Fi Channel. It was like their biggest show right now on the Sci-Fi Channel.
The biggest show right now?
Googling biggest show.
Yeah, I don't know. Their
on
biggest show.
Sci-Fi
Their biggest show
Channel.
ever was Stargate Sg-1.
No,
that's like the biggest show
Bullshit.
the Sci-Fi Channel has ever done.
The hell it was.
It ran for is it still running? Like it ran for 28 seasons or something.
Excuse me, I think you're forgetting about Battlestar Galactica. That was by far the biggest show that Sci-Fi ever did.
Yeah.
It didn't run.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself, Ken.
It didn't run as long?
It wasn't very long. Like it didn't run very long.
Since when has that been a mark of quality?
Well, that's true.
I mean,
I like Stargate.
SG-1 should have really kind of stopped about season 6.
But it ran 12 seasons and had 2 spin-offs, and
did.
I think they're still making movies.
They're going to reboot it. They're going to reboot it. They're not making movies with that cast.
Well,
they're going to reboot
They
it.
most recently made a movie with that cast 2 years ago or something. So
No, I don't think so.
Well, we'll find out.
I would have watched that shit. If we're going to go down Stargate first 5 seasons that were on Showtime, fucking amazing. Great show. Suffered quite a bit after it left.
Ran for 10 seasons.
Yeah. So half of them were good.
Yeah.
There were some gems later on, but really
had 2 spinoffs that had 5 seasons. And then
no, they had 2 spinoffs.
2 spinoffs, right?
And one of them only had 2 seasons.
Okay.
Universe got canceled after 2nd season.
Okay.
But Atlantis, also an amazing show. And that was a Sci-Fi show too. They sunk a lot of money into Stargate Atlantis. So
Yeah, they did.
yeah. Anyway.
Well, to kind of wrap up this TV episode, I found out a really interesting piece of trivia the other day. And that is that when the show, that 70s show started,
Yep.
if we were when they had started right now, the same time difference would have passed between the beginning of the 70s and now as if we were currently starting a show called That 90s Show.
Which I think should happen. They should reunite that cast.
Well, you remember they did try That 80s Show,
that was concurrent. That was like a spinoff. That was sort of one of those spiritual spinoffs, concurrent, and it didn't that's a character-driven show. It wasn't a premise-driven show, and that's what they missed. Was you can't take the premise. Like people weren't into it because it was nostalgic. About the 70s. They were in it because the characters worked.
Right.
And it also happened to be nostalgic.
That 90s show has already been done. I mean,
it has.
Well, and they've since done a successful
Boy
version
Meets
of
World.
Well, and they've since done a successful version of that 80s show called The Goldbergs, which is still running and is still successful.
Which I fucking hate that show so much.
I like it, but
I had no idea that when they were actually filming that 70s show, it was that close to when it was. Like I look at the 90s and I'm like, dude, I remember the 90s. Like
perpetually, Vietnam to me is 20 years ago. Because when I was a kid, Vietnam was only 20 years ago. So people who were Vietnam veterans were only in their 40s.
Yeah.
Dang.
That's how time works, Carly.
Time is so crazy, guys.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre for me to realize that one of the reasons when I lived in Germany as a kid, that Germany was the way it was. It's very strange to think that it was only like 35 years since the end of World War II.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Like, because you think of World War II as being like, that was like 100 years ago. Like, no,
I don't think
35 years
I don't
before.
think about World War II like it was 100 years ago.
Well, one of the things that you are going to start, because you're 28.
30.
You're 30 now? Wow. You look great for a 30-year-old.
Thanks, Matt.
But especially, it starts to really come into focus in your 30s, and I think that Ken will agree with me. And the older that you get, I'm 42, the older that you get, the more time seems to speed up. And they say that it is a perspective thing, because when you were a kid, 8 years ago could be like, when you're 16, 8 years ago is like half your life. I mean, and that seems like forever. And I remember, man, my parents who were in their 40s at the time, they'd be like, well, don't worry, we'll get you that next year. And I'm like, next year might as well be
forever away.
When I'm 40 years old. Like, that's forever now. And now it is like that. I mean, I'm getting ready to go back to Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. I'm going back to Las Vegas twice on business. Mm-hmm. The second time I'm going back is going to be during the anniversary of the Vegas shooting, which I was in Las Vegas for.
Oh my gosh.
And it's been 1 year, and it seems like literally it was like 6 months ago or 3 months ago. Like it's just, and of course, don't even get me started on how Donald Trump has been president for 8 years.
So long.
It's been
so long.
So but no, there's just time, just your perspective of time just changes.
Collapses like crazy. Yeah. I looked up the thing. You were right. The last Stargate movie was in 2011, but what I was thinking of was...
I was what?
You were right. But what I was thinking of was a Stargate Origins, which came out in July 2017, which is
that's
the most
true,
recent.
and I think that thing cratered.
I think it did, because it was supposed to be like
that's like, I'm not even dignifying that with a
It was supposed to be the
remembrance.
first in like a series of spin-offs based on that universe.
Well, they were going to try to make a streaming service based around Stargate, and I'm like,
whoa,
that's
guys, that is a disproportionate response.
Yeah, but that show was also one of those shows kind of like Supernatural, where like it kept getting renewed on the basis of like a really small but very devout fan base. That was
that show's still on the air, isn't it?
Oh yeah, but it's like it's
poor guys.
Well, but it's because not statistically like a whole lot of people are watching it, but the people who are watching it
rabid fans of it.
Rabidly.
Yeah, and that's how Stargate was. Stargate didn't have a huge fan base, but it had a very loyal fan base.
Right, and I don't think I've ever made it past where you were talking about, but this is a good start.
The entire cast changes like in season 8 or something like that, and it's just like, everybody goes away, and
absolutely.
It's just.
But you were making a point a minute ago, and it's kind of like the last thing that I wanted to throw out there was you were talking about how difficult some of these things are, and I was watching a behind the scenes a while back on The Wrath of Khan, and they were interviewing Ricardo Montalban, and one of the things that
on a couch of rich Corinthian leather.
Yeah, and one of the things that he...
you have no idea what that is.
No, but I know that reference somehow.
It's from commercials that he used to do for Chrysler back in the day. The Chrysler Baron.
Right, yeah. Well,
I think before your time.
But he was talking about how when they hired him to return as Khan, he had to ask them to send him like a reel-to-reel of Space Seed, where he had played that, because he didn't want to play him as Mr. Rourke, who had been playing on Fantasy Island for the last 5 years or whatever.
Well, your fantasies will come true.
And he was like, I didn't want to play him as like. And every time I read the script, I was like, holy crap, I'm reading him as Mr. Rourke, and that like you can't interchange.
Right.
You can't interchange those two characters.
Yeah, that would be weird.
So he was like, so I had to get them to send me a reel of, and I'm like, and it took me this minute to like have this moment of, even though this is within my lifetime, it took me this moment to be like, oh wait, like back then you couldn't just like go watch an episode of a show from 20 years ago.
You had to send it to you on 16mm film. You had to like put it in a projector. And...
It's like, here's a print of this that aired on television.
I mean, you would have had VHS at the time, but it was so uncommon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like Ricardo would have had VHS.
And TV shows weren't really on VHS. Like, you couldn't go to the store and pick up like a full season on VHS of a TV show.
And I'm going to...
when did that start?
DVDs. Mostly. You could get Star Trek. You could purchase Star Trek on VHS, but that was back when it was like a whole Time Life project where you would like get 2 episodes every 2 months, and people that owned the entire run of a TV show had like a shelf with like rows and rows of tapes.
God, I just had like the most insane flashback
if you
of
consider
picturing
a
that
100-episode TV show,
I
would
remember
be 50
what that looked
VHS.
like.
Also remember that like even in the 80s, everyone knew that VHS quality sucked. Like it just sucked, and we knew it sucked, but it was the only thing we had.
Right. Yeah.
If
not
somebody
just,
like Ricardo
in fidelity either.
Yeah.
Like they would like there were things that you couldn't even
the sound
get in,
was okay.
But there were things you couldn't even get in like widescreen. Because commercially,
widescreen like your TV at home was a 4:3, so what the fuck's the point? But I would say that Ricardo Montalban would have a projector because as pain in the ass as the projector was,
it was better quality.
It was HD back when a time when HD didn't exist because you had original film prints.
Yeah, he would have sat on his Corinthian leather couch and watched it.
Or he had a Laserdisc player. Which Laserdisc existed back then, so.
Whoa.
Yeah, but do you really think somebody transferred a single episode
onto a
Laserdisc for him?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably not.
No.
Well, good. That was not what we were planning to go into this. Okay,
that was great, guys.
If you're a regular and you're not particularly a Star Trek fan, please know, based on the last few episodes, we are going to talk about things other than Star Trek going forward.
I was telling somebody about the podcast recently that I'd like texted like both times that we were recording, and he was like, well, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, we're talking about Star Wars. And he was like, do you always talk about Star Wars? And I was like, no.
Star Trek is
sometimes we talk about other things.
Star Trek has sort of turned into our new MCU, like where somehow we end up talking about it every episode. So
which Matt is glad because it's not about superheroes.
We're going to pepper in a little more variety in the next episode. So no Star Trek in the next episode.
Damn it, Matt. Damn it.
So, we'll talk to you about those other things next week.
Yeah, stay tuned. We'll see you next week.
Till then, that's Car2 that
I'm Car2.
And I'm Ken, and that's Matt over there being a dick.
Ken suddenly became incapable of wrapping up an episode.
So,
okay, baby.
I can wrap up an episode.
Show me.
Bye. Figures Sold Separately is a multiverse podcast produced by TurboFanProductions.com. Please remember to subscribe to the show and follow and talk with us on Facebook and Twitter. Our theme music is by I Fight Dragons. Hear more about them at ifightdragons.com. Figures Sold Separately is copyright 2018, all rights reserved.